right. Well, welcome back to the Sawyer on Water podcast. Today we are back on the Rogue River, back on home water, and talking with Trevor with Rafting Magazine and kind of what he's been doing in the industry. And we're also going to take a little deep dive into just kind of how Trevor got started and how we can brainstorm a little bit of how people can get involved in the rafting industry and the paddling industry in general. And so I'm going to turn it over to Trevor. And Trevor, why don't you just introduce yourself to the folks and tell us a little bit about yourself and Rafting Magazine.
Sure. Well, if you don't know me, my name's Trevor. I run Rafting Magazine, and been boating for a long time. And kids always say I'm the old man of the river now, and I'm like, I'm not old.
I get that as well. I don't know what it is. They like to put that title on, folks, huh?
It's too much. It's too much. Anyway, so yeah, I run Rafting Magazine. Get out there and paddle as much as I can, wherever I can, all over the world. And I guess we're talking about origin stories and all. So
absolutely,
I guess I can start with that. So as far as getting started in the river community for me. There was this Irish lady making fun of me in a karate class one day, and then I was a raft guide. So that's the quick version. But I started in California on the South Fork of the American River. I didn't even know enough to know that I didn't know what was going on. I think the first 5 commercial trips I had, I rapped on one of the bigger Class 3 rapids. Same rock every time. Boom, 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 boom. I didn't think I was going to make it. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing out here. And then, years started to go on, and eventually I ended up buying a rafting company on the Three Forks of the American. So I started that up, and then, that was a really challenging time for me. I think let my ego get to me a little too much, and then just being a young guy. I mean, I started at 23, and then, like I said, my ego got to me, and I kind of ran my company into the ground. And then after that, I ended up taking a little break from rafting for about a year or so and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with myself. And at one point I found myself in the Stanislaus River, kind of one of the origins of rafting. One of the first real commercial sections of the river back in like the 60s. And so I was on the Camp 9 section, and it was paddling out there in my own boat and just R1ing. And the lake was super low, so the section was come out of the water, and we were able to run it. Super low drought year, and I was just thinking to myself, I got a lot of knowledge about rafting, and I feel like it'd be a waste not to share it and get more people excited and involved in the boating community. So here I am, floating around with Zach and talking about rafting.
Nice. So let's dive into kind of the origin of how Rafting Magazine started, and kind of how it's evolved.
Okay, so I think the biggest thing for the Whitewater community is that there's not been a lot of information out there. There's never been a rafting magazine before.
Right.
Which is crazy to me, considering there's tons of kayak magazines, and there's all sorts of magazines that focus on, telling you how to get the best paddle or get, which boat is the best, but not in rafting. I mean,
Right. Exactly. They don't even have a category for oars. Actually, they they want us to advertise, but they're like, yeah, we're just gonna put your oar product in the paddling category.
You're like, yeah, that's not really what that is. But what's crazy is that there's so many fishermen out there. There's so many, the angling community's got huge, especially in easier whitewater or moving water, class 1, class 2 kind of stuff like this. And that's a huge industry, possibly arguably more than the class 5 rafting.
Right.
And I stopped by the factory today, and, I'm just like, it's kind of shocking when you go in there and see how much product you guys have going through there. So, I think what happens a lot is we get stuck in our own communities because we have all these disparate boating communities. It's not like skiing where you have a ski town. And
right.
10 ski areas with 10, 20, 30,000 people in town at any one time. It's more like you have somewhere like Coloma, you probably have 2,000, 3,000 people in town at once and they leave for the weekend. So
Yep, and that's kind of like there are river towns, river communities, but there's not really like a place that people just like gravitate if they're going to go raft.
yeah, I think that it exists in small amounts here and there, but it's not the same. So, looking at that, we have all these disparate communities. We have people in disparate places all over the United States and the world, for that matter, trying to figure out how we learn to raft.
Right.
And as I travel the world and see different places, if I go to West Virginia or go to France or, I've been to Central Asia too. And different people are learning how to boat different ways. And I think what tends to happen is we kind of get stuck in our ways and say, well, this is the way, this is what rafting is. And what I think happens when people start to travel is that they say, oh, well, this is what rafting is. They go to a different place. And it's kind of shocking.
Right. This is how it's different here. Yeah, exactly. Because it's almost like, just the very simplistic piece of paddling in the east, rowing in the west. Like, it's like so many commercial companies just run paddle boats. Mm-hmm. And out in the west, it's kind of like if you don't know how to row, it's kind of like you are not as marketable as a river guide.
Yep.
And so it's like you have to know how to row. And I remember actually when I was an outfitter, I would get these resumes of these people that would just have lengthy resumes of all this river time they had and all this commercial time they had. But you look through it and it's like, wow, they've never rowed.
Yeah.
And so it takes them a little while, but they have, like, depending on how well they had that reading river skill down, they could adapt to the fact that, I'm just running a paddle boat with two big paddles instead of one little one.
Yeah,
totally different thing.
It's a huge change in mindset. So I think when people go out to different rivers, see different things, it's shocking, and it kind of hits us in weird ways because, like I said, with having my own rafting company and being an outfitter, egos can run high in the river community.
Oh yeah,
from time to time. Not saying it happens to everybody, but from time to time we get that. And I think what that comes from is people building an identity of themselves as a boater in a certain way.
Right.
That leads to going to a different place, kind of shakes that identity. So for me, when I'm out and I'm going to other places, I'm always trying to say to myself, like, what can I learn from this boating community that is different from mine, and why does it work? Because what you do and how you boat works in your in your setting. So and it's not necessarily every setting that's like that, but I go out to France, and I have some good friends in France and Italy, and go out there pretty frequently to paddle. And what ends up happening is no one's rowing. Like,
right. Everybody's paddle boating
because you're in these steep creeks and steep rivers that have rocks everywhere, and you try to bring oars out and you just bust oars all over the place.
Right.
It's too tight, it's too narrow, it's too shallow. Like it's just a hard place to run oars. But you go to Whitewater, Cataract Canyon, and everybody's running oars. No one wants to paddle because there's a lot of flat water out there too.
Right.
So for me, when I see that people are going to different areas and training and learning, I mean, you can go to a guide school.
Yeah.
And that's historically been the only way to get into the industry. And for me, I think that going to guide schools is helpful, but it's very kind of basic instruction. The instruction that you're getting there is largely for raft guiding.
Yeah.
And, I always joke with people, I say I'm not a raft guide. No, I've been a raft guide for 26 years, but
I've played one on TV.
I play a raft guide, and I always joke about that. I say I'm not a raft guide, So what ends up happening is I get on these rivers, and people are like, "Wait, you know how to raft guide?" And it's like, I've gone to guide schools. I've taken a lot of training to be a raft
forward
guide.
in the setting.
I've done a lot of training to be a raft guide, checked out different guide schools, learned about different ways that people teach, learned about ways that people get guides ready. And when I see this training, again, it's mostly focused on raft guides. So you end up having a component of it where you're learning to cut onions.
Right.
You might be an angler just trying to learn how to be out here catching eddies like we just did and casting from those eddies. That might not be your thing.
Right.
You know, I work with fire service personnel who come out and they don't need to learn how to make a pineapple boat. They need to learn how to save somebody's life.
Right.
So the
hard paddle up into the sand.
Yeah, the hard river skills become very important for raft guides, but they're not the only thing. And when I joke and say I'm not a raft guide, you know, I'm more of a tour guide, or that's more of where my focus is. It's not necessarily the hard whitewater raft guiding. It's more of like, I jokingly say I'm an entertainer.
Right.
And I feel like that's a big part of raft guiding, but not everybody needs that. Not everybody wants that.
Yeah.
Some people are just private boaters. One of the kids I train, Monica, she's not interested in raft guiding. She's a fantastic boater, strong paddler. She knows how to read water. She's really good at it, but you know, she doesn't want a raft guide. So going to a guide school doesn't necessarily help.
Right.
And one of the things that's popped into my head working in ski areas since I was very young, I was 16 when I first started working at a ski area on Lake Tahoe, is that every ski area you go to, I traveled around, skied a lot of different ski areas, what's the one thing they have in common? They got a ski school.
Ski school, yeah.
Anywhere, any mountain you go to, even if it's the tiniest little single lift mountain, they got a ski school. There's an instructor there to teach.
Yep. Somebody's going to bring you into the fold.
But that's not how it is in Whitewater.
Yeah.
Any river town you go to, there's a guide school maybe once a year at a rafting company. And a couple of rafting companies might do a little guide school, try to pull some guides out of there. But that's the norm for that. It's not private boater schools.
Right.
It's starting to get a little bit more popular, but we're not really driving the numbers yet.
Yeah.
Like ski schools, you see they are driving big numbers, and they're the foundation. And talking with people in that industry, you see that a lot of their clientele gets stuck in the middle as intermediate skiers, and that's not the worst thing in the world. But they have most of their attrition with their clients at the low end. So maybe you're going to only get 40% of all the people that go to a ski school to come and continue skiing. But those 40% are going to excel into being an intermediate skier pretty reliably. And of that 40% over the course of going from beginner to low intermediate to high intermediate skiers, you're not going to have much attrition. It's a couple percent. So this is a problem we're having. I think this is my hot take on rafting. Is that
right. So you get people introduced to it, but then they just kind of fizzle.
And I think that outfitters play a really crucial role in that.
Right.
And I think it's something that we haven't focused on as commercial guides and boaters. I just don't think it's something that we focus on, like building people up to say, here's the next step. Let's go forward. Here's how we're going to get you to paddle another river and get you skilled enough to do this. And I think it comes to this interesting philosophy I ran into a bunch of years ago when I was an outfitter. I had a guy give me a call, and he said, "Hey, Trevor, I want to learn to raft." And I said, "Well, sir, I don't have time to teach you in one day how to raft. You just want to sign up for a day trip." And he said, No. Like, he said, we come from a very urban environment. We're not from the United States, and we don't go into the outdoor studio play. And so he says, like, I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know how to get on the water. I don't know what rafting is. I don't know anything about it. So I want to learn. And that kicked something in my head when I said, okay, he's not actually asking to be a raft guy or me to teach him to be a boater. What he's asking me to do is teach him the very lowest fundamentals.
Right.
And turns out,
start building the skill set.
Yeah, his wife didn't even know how to swim. So from that point, we said, okay, let's do this. Let's teach you how a personal flotation device works. Let's just get you sitting in flat water floating. And then I pushed her towards one of my guides, and then she floated and thought it was great. And I was like, okay, let's start trusting your gear.
Yeah.
And so it took that, and part of his concern was he wanted to take his kids, but
Right,
he didn't think
right.
he didn't know if it was safe because he had no basis for understanding.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that happens with boaters a lot. Like, we live in a community that we're very, what's a good way to put it? Like, we're very outside. We like live outside, everything is outside.
Right.
The rules of polite society are relaxed. So if you take a raft guide and you plop a raft guide at a fancy dinner, we don't have like much basis for understanding. We're not going to these like fancy dinner parties where everybody's wearing a ball gown and then going to a gala afterwards at the opera.
Right.
That's not like the norm for raft guides.
Most river guides are not seeking out the opera.
Yeah.
Not to say that some of them don't go to the opera, but
I know
it's not
some
something they're
fancy people
seeking
who
out.
do. But yeah, most people aren't seeking it out. So, for most, the average boater, we might not have a basis for understanding for how to act in that environment, where we're supposed to sit, what utensils we're supposed to use. The same thing applies to folks who live in an urban environment and don't come out and get this. So, I start working with them and we go rafting. I show them a lot of the basics and I sit down and get them paddling and get them doing the actual like motor movements of that.
Actually working the equipment.
And so one of my old rafting mentors, Bill McGinnis, he used to own a company called Whitewater.
Oh yeah.
You know who he is, but
Oh yeah.
Bill McGinnis had this philosophy that said you need to take people from fear to confidence to joy. And
Right.
I don't think we teach that enough. I think that there's a huge and important place for that in boating, and especially as a raft guide or as an outfitter, that we're taking people from fear because they don't know enough to know that they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's kind of that bit where even on a commercial trip, they have to get over some of that fear, because on a commercial trip, like, you need to give up your responsibility to the 19 or 20-year-old that's in the back of the boat. Like, that person is in charge. It doesn't matter what you do in the rest of your life, and you may be a corporate bigwig, but right now you're one of 6 paddlers, and this person in the back is in charge. And that's a hard piece for some people to get. Just in general, it's like they got to let go of that control. And then, every raft guide has probably had that person who, they seem pretty outgoing, they seem fairly fit, but they're a little bit, they won't give it away. They won't let the control go away. So you start out your day and maybe you're a decent paddler, but then you notice that in the first couple miles, they're making corrections.
Yep.
And you're like, wait a minute. And so then you have to, it's like that is one of those really delicate things as a raft guide. You have to kind of politely figure out how to move them to a different location in the boat.
Yep.
So that they will not, just work against you.
It's so funny too, because you ask raft guides and you ask any boaters, even if you're taking your friends, it's like, who would you rather take? The person who's throwing in all these check strokes and like messing up your lines, or you want to take the person who's paddling like this?
Right.
With the T-grip. And you're like, okay, maybe I'll take the T-grip person. At least, it's about being coachable if you're a person going on the water. And I do this too, where I get in boats with people and I have to give up control.
Oh,
and
yeah.
be like, all right, look, you're the raft guide, take us through. And especially when you're teaching people. And that's a hard thing to do.
Right. And so basically, that was was that the beginning. So about probably this was you were when you were outfitting,
Mm-hmm.
you started teaching this gentleman and his family, and then what kind of stemmed it into where you are now with it?
So I think that this philosophy is something that I taught for a while to several of my raft guides. And then just understanding that first we have to have the empathy for people.
Right.
Maybe don't know what they're doing. And then I kind of have this theory about the outdoors, and especially in rafting, that I don't think we're chill people. Everybody's like, oh, you guys are so chill and laid back and stuff. And I don't actually think that. I think, this is my other hot take, I think we're actually kind of hyper-aggressive people. It just manifests in different ways.
Right. Yeah.
And so, it's a challenge when you're out there.
Right.
And so sometimes you end up butting heads with people. And I've done this too. Like friend of mine, I butt heads with him on some stuff, and then we had this kind of coming together a year or two ago where, you know, we actually realized like, hey, we're actually both trying to do good for the same people thing. And trying to teach people, and we just want people to become better, but we have our own way of doing it, and so it becomes a challenge. And breaking through that and being able to take a step back and just be like, all right, what do you have to teach me? From anybody. And I think one of the most stark contrasts of that hitting me was going to Italy for the first time. I met this gal, and her name's Letitia, and Letty, everybody calls her. So Letty's she's like 5'1" or 5'2".
Oh yeah.
Looks like she's 100 pounds soaking wet. I get in the boat with her. She says she wants to R2 with me. I'm like, okay, cool. I get in the boat with her, start paddling with her. Well, she's a raft racer. And I didn't realize how bad my form was because this girl is out paddling. I'm like, I probably got like 40 pounds of muscle on her, and she's paddling harder, faster, and more consistently than I am. And there's one of two ways I could have taken it. I could have been just like, got aggressive with it, and been like, oh, I'm gonna out paddle her, and just blew my shoulders out and not learn anything. But instead I said, hold on, Letty. Show me how you're paddling. Teach me what you're doing to paddle. Right. And she's like, well, why? You're a good paddler. Like, I know you've traveled all over the place. And I said, the problem is you're over paddling me, and I don't know why. I can't understand it. And this was maybe 2017. So she taught me a lot about paddling and form and proper strokes, and it changed the whole way I started to think about paddling, and then it changed the way I actually paddle. So, you know, you kind of got to humble yourself a little bit,
right.
to do that. But also, those resources have to be out there. And flying to Italy, finding these people to paddle with, going and paddling with them, working out all the accommodations and all that. I mean, for the average person, this would be a multi-$1,000 endeavor.
Right.
Luckily, when I took a little break from rafting, I became a travel agent and kind of figured out how to, you know, make it a little bit cheaper for me. But still, like, it was a huge commitment of time and money and research.
Right.
And so seeking that out is very, very hard. So the whole point of why I wanted to start Rafting Magazine, and what I did was I grabbed a camera, I grabbed a GoPro, and just started talking at a GoPro. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yeah, that's kind of how a lot of us were during COVID. It was like, we need to get out here in front of everybody, and we can't be in the public space. So what's the best thing? Let's just put it on the screen. And I had that discussion with some of our team. Is like, you know, there's like, I don't know if we're going to be professional enough. I'm like, have you seen what's on TV? Like, you got people that are doing interviews, and half the time the screen just blanks out because they have terrible signal where they're at. I'm like, we'll be fine.
I mean, that's the thing. We just got to get out there and do it and start talking about it. And there's a lot of people from a lot of different places that have really good ideas about boating and that work really well. Like, moving down the road here, like, this is not the type of river I would run. It's, you know, a flatter river, probably a little bit higher volume in the spring. And I don't often run these kinds of rivers. So for me, and you know, even when I went out to the gully, I was like, there's no rocks in this river except for the ones that are like undercuts.
Right. Except for the ledges.
I'm like, we don't really have this problem in California. I mean, we got sieves and stuff, but it's not the same. You don't have like entire banks that are just cut out with a cave in there. So I look at the gully boaters and I talk to them and I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing out here? Like, how are you boating? What are you guys thinking? What's going through your head as you run rapids? And you start seeing like patterns in how they run whitewater. You see patterns in how they're reading water. And one of the things that I encountered over the years is that people oftentimes don't have the breadth and depth of vocabulary to describe what's happening. It's like when you put a name to a fear, you can understand why you have that fear.
Right,
I'm afraid of spiders. Like, okay, why are you afraid of spiders? You start digging into it. It's the same thing with rafting. Like, you go, oh, there's a line there. And you say, okay, well, how do you know there's a line? Well, you're avoiding that hole. Well, what's the hole? And people go, well, that thing over there, that splooshy thing.
Right.
And it's like, okay, you ask 20 boaters what a hole is and you'll get 20 different responses. But if we have a better understanding for how we define what a hole is, or we define what a wave is, or define what the best line is, then we start to understand stuff and put it together.
Right.
And there's a lot of physics involved, and that a lot of people get lost in the physics.
Yeah. And there are boaters that have don't have the skill of reading water, that they basically get trained on specific runs and they learn routes.
Yep.
Right. And so you can either learn routes or you can read water.
Yep.
And it's kind of like, if you're learning routes, that can lead you to guiding. You know, that can get you some employment. But then eventually you need to take beyond the route running and then start to read the water. And reading just the hydrology of it is very important for people to start to understand. And that's kind of part of a journey of a river guide, I think. And most private boaters as well. Is like, and once they get to a certain point, where I remember when there were, we had the Rogue River had, on the Wild and Scenic section, we had really high water in the summertime. And so it wasn't the 1700 CFS that people were used to. It was 3500 CFS. And so they could make their way down. They could make their way down through most everything, but when they got to Blossom, where they had to make a move, it wasn't registering that this is much faster, and you know, the consequences are going to come up much quicker. And there were a lot of incidents in Blossom, and it was all because people weren't really putting it together that, oh, this is not the normal summer flow river that I'm used to, you know. And that's a lot of kind of information that needs to be shared with folks, and that's like the importance of keeping a log and that kind of thing. Let's go forward.
We see this a lot. We see this a lot in California as well, when we have people that get trained in the springtime, and it's, you know, bigger water. We're talking South Fork American River at, you know, 7,000 CFS.
Right.
It's a different river from the normal commercial flows of 1,400 to 15 or 13, 15, 17, 18, something like that.
Yeah.
That's a very different river. So you see people go from like greasing all their lines. You're like, okay, I know this route, I know this rapid, I know this rapid. They run all of that, and then the water drops. And then maybe they were running Troublemaker on the South Fork American at high water right down the middle at 3 to 5,000 CFS. It's a totally easy line right down the middle, boop, boop, boop. People are running that, and then all of a sudden it drops, and they go for that line, and it's an island of rock.
Right.
And then, you know, you're getting smashed up on rocks on the side of the river, or rocks at all, because, you know, you're not used to rocks being there. So but if you can read water, you can go to those places and say, it's just a much more powerful tool. You can go to those places and say, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing. I'm just going to take this and go that way and hit this blushy thing and see what happens. So I think having that information available to people and being able to say, like, okay, I can go as deep into this as I want to. I mean, it took me a lot of time to travel around, talk to people in different places, understand reading water, understand the hydrology of it. I mean,
right.
I had to go to BYU, and at BYU I think it's Provo has they have an artificial channel and a big lab where they do dam safety testing.
Oh, okay.
And so I got to sit with this professor named Roland Hotchkiss, and the American Whitewater dam database was his kind of a pet project that he was trying to push over to American Whitewater, and because he didn't know how to get it out to boaters. So one of the cool things about going there was learning from him, sitting in on some of his classes, and understanding what needs to happen to make dams more safe, but also what boaters need to understand about different hydraulic features in the river and what's happening. Like, and again, back to the hole thing. Like, a hole is not a hole; it's 20 different things.
Right.
So, but that becomes a very specific feature, and if you learn the physics principles behind it and can narrow it down to just saying, like, okay, it's. I mean, really talking to him, he said to me, "Look, Trevor, hydrology is really just 8 things." And I'm like, okay. Please tell me, sir, what do you got? And so he said, it's basically like these 3 flow states, 4 hydraulic jumps, and how much water is actually going down the channel. The flow. He goes, that's it.
That's everything we're seeing here.
And I'm like, I got a million boaters who will say something otherwise. But he says, no, like when you study physics and look at fluid dynamics, that's what it is. It's 8 things.
Right.
And I thought about that, and I'm like, if I could teach a boater 8 different things and then be infinitely more well equipped to go down the river, that's time well spent, Mike. So
Yeah.
this is where I started from with Rafting Magazine and where I've been going, and trying to make that happen with especially with the teen kids that I teach and different guide schools that I am a part of and try to teach with. So
Nice. And so most all of the teachings that you're doing are to pretty much independent recreational boaters that want to improve their boating skills and learn actual river skills so they can go on the river. Like the gentleman you talked about in the beginning, like we jokingly say that, how do you turn a kayaker into a rafter is when they get married and they have kids. And then they realize that they can't really take their kid on the hardshell kayak. And so then they get to that point where they're just like, okay, they got to buy their first raft, and they're kind of like, they know that a lot of times kayakers know how to read water, but they know how to read water in a sports car. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, now I'm driving the cargo van. It doesn't quite handle it the same way. And once again, they kind of have to learn the rowing skill first, as well as because they have the paddling skill, and they may be decent paddlers, but the rowing skill is so much different, and just the way to attack things is so much different. So there's a lot of that. I know that you guys do a lot of paddling, a lot of paddle boating. That is pretty much your forte. You do a lot of R4, R2, and why do you find that is a little bit more of a pure way to get that understanding? I mean, what has steered you away from Oars?
I think largely geology. And
the types of rivers you're on, and
I mean, the things I like to run are low volume steep creeks.
Right.
That's my jam. And people give me a ton of crap for it. They're like, you're the king of low water boating. They're like, if it's wet, just splash some water on the rock and Trevor will go. Which to some extent is true, but I do like a little bit of water now and again. But the reality is, that's what I mostly boat.
Right. Okay.
I call it kind of the 80% rule. I say, what do you boat 80% of the time? So when I'm trying to teach people and talk about skills that you need to learn or things you need to practice, okay, what is it you're going to boat 80% of the time? Are you on the Rogue 80% of the time fishing? Because that's a whole different skill set than if you're running Cherry Creek 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Or if you're running the Upper Gully. Cherry Creek, you're making big Class 5 moves. You're running the Upper Gully most of the time. You're still making those Class 5 moves, but it's more big water. The news like that too. You go out in West Virginia, it's big water. It's water everywhere. So you need to have a different skill set for that. Maybe you're rowing. Maybe you're oar paddle combo. Are you on the Grand Canyon? If you're on the Grand Canyon paddling, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know that I want to paddle.
There's fewer and fewer paddle boats on the Grand than there are rigs that are hauling gear and hauling people.
Exactly.
So it's like, that's a whole different mindset.
So are you in Utah running Yampa, Green, Gates of Lador, Daily section, stuff like that? You're on Oars because you've got these long stretches for miles, tens of miles of flat water, and you're just chugging along with the Oars. And it's totally fine, but with a paddle boat, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to do this again. And, I've R2'd the Daily section of the Colorado and felt like I wish I had Oars right now. So I'm not running a lot of Oars because when I'm running steep drops, I'll go out to Pitt River, for instance, or something like South Silver Creek. It's 440 foot per mile gradient. Right. We're dropping big waterfalls all the time. I don't like all the metal around. One of the problems is when you ship your oars, now you have these things that you have to worry about. You can't reach back, hold onto a strap. Drop,
Right.
drop.
Right.
So again, it comes back to that 80% rule. And people ask me about paddles. They say, oh, should I get, this paddle? Should I get that paddle? Like, what kind of paddle should I get? Well, what are you running 80% of the time?
Right.
Are you raft racing? Well, if you're raft racing, you should probably get a racing paddle.
Yep.
But
Yep.
if you're raft guiding, I would say get a highly reinforced paddle, free fall, something like that. And so gear comes down to what you spend most of your time.
Yeah, we tell people that all the time, is because basically, mostly it's on the oar question, as far as people ask, whether they should get the shoal cut blade, which is more designed for shallow water, or they should get the more traditional wide blade. And so, that's literally one of those questions all the time. It's we don't even go to 80%. We're just what do you row over 50% of the time? Where do you spend the majority of your water?
Yeah.
And it's if you're spending the majority of your water on big, high volume stuff, then, just get the standard blade and you'll be fine, In the shallow water, in those few days or few weeks that you run really shallow, you're going to be okay, but really, exactly buy for what you're going to do the most of. And so I see how, paddling is definitely, it fits what you like to paddle and what you like to teach people on.
Yep.
And so, and steep creeks that are a lot of busy drops and you don't want to have those things in your way. You don't want to be, flying into oars. And, and so definitely it is kind of more appropriate for the type of water you're boating.
And I think expertise comes from that. And I think that's a really big piece of it. It's not just equipment. Because when you look at someone's expertise and their skills with paddling and whitewater or any sort of moving water, those skills come from what you do 80% of the time and what the majority of your boating is. So a lot of times what will happen is people will say, oh, I want to push my limits, or I want to go out. I got an invite out to, Fort Canyon or the Numbers in the Arkansas, right? So you go, oh, I want to go push my limits. Well, let's say you're you boat this most of the time. You boat the Rogue, and your friend goes out and is living in Colorado, and you want to go paddle in Colorado. Well, you start going into a new type of whitewater, and so you start spending all of your time out there in that 20%, and you start feeling out of your comfort zone. And I think a lot of people kind of give up on it. And that's one of the things that if I had any message to say to people is that when you go to a different area, there's a different culture, there's a different type of whitewater, and there's a different skill base, and there's a different amount of expertise. And those things are all valid.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And so what we tend to do is this us and them thing as humans. We say if we're not comfortable with it, if we're not used to it, that's some weird nebulous other. We don't want to talk about that. It's not right.
Right.
And it becomes a value judgment rather than oh, this is a different skill set that maybe I haven't trained on. And so training comes down to it too. And this is why I like doing training. I can take the kids out and train them all the time to death, because I think that you become better because of your training.
Right. I mean, definitely it's repetition in the whitewater space is something that is lacking. Mm-hmm. Because even, to use the lower Rogue analogy again, is someone is trying to learn the lower Rogue so that they feel comfortable to take their friends, take their family, or even get on a commercial guided trip. And so, but they only get that repetition once a week, right? And so you got to go quite a few times. And so if there's intense whitewater sections that you can do laps on, and get that repetition, then there's kind of more of there's a motor skill where you're learning it and you're I know exactly what happened to me in that hole last time I was here. I know exactly what happened to me in that lateral last time I was here. I'm not going to hit it with that angle because it did that to me. And you can kind of do the cause and effect piece if you're getting that repetition in there and kind of spending that time.
Yeah. And there's this pro surfer that I watched an interview with him years ago. He passed away, but he said that the interviewer said, hey, what's the difference between you and every other surfer out there? And he's one of the top surfers in the world. He went on all the competitions, he's taken first place. And he says, the only difference between me and everybody else on the break is time in the water and wave count. And I would say this to rafters too. It's river miles and number of rapids you run. Because we could run this all day long and not have those higher level skills. And we could run really hard whitewater just a short amount of time. One of those we're not getting the river miles, and one of those we're not getting the rapids. You have to have both to make you a better, more well-rounded boater. And I was in a fire service course some years ago and talking with some guys that were like former military guys. And they're talking about your level of mastery, and when things start getting crazy, when you start having those adrenaline surges and get into crazy environments or outside your comfort zone, what happens is they say you revert to your lowest level of mastery. And they put it like this: you have your level of mastery, and you have your highest skill level. And so when we're out chilling like this, we can operate our highest skill level. We can run gates, we can flip boats, we can do all sorts of stuff. You know, we get into crazy class 5, you start getting locked in, and then all of a sudden, all of this extra skill that you have, that goes away.
That goes away because you haven't mastered the moves you need.
And I've paddled with people who have a high level of skill, but a very low level of mastery. In fact, forward paddles and back paddles, like even just proper back paddling stroke or draw strokes, not even high braces or something like that. Even like properly doing a back paddle, that wasn't within their level of mastery. They hadn't done enough of those strokes.
Right.
You know, they say it takes 10,000 hours to become a master or something. So if you don't spend 10,000 hours mastering forward paddle, like we kind of laugh about it, but at some point, if you're not competent at doing forward paddles, you become like me and Letty.
Right.
She's a way better paddler than me doing forward strokes because she spent the reps doing forward paddle. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing because I see someone of a higher mastery level and a certain skill. And then
let's go forward into this eddy.
When it hits the fan, I'm all of a sudden not making the forward paddle strokes that I'm supposed to make. I'm not thinking about where I'm placing my paddle blade. I'm not thinking about my body dynamics. I might be down protecting. I might be down in the boat like this and trying to paddle like that, as opposed to being up and getting that fully engaged flow.
Right.
So all of that skill that I might have about all of the class 5 I've run, or the first descents I've done, or anything like that, that goes out the window. That doesn't mean anything if I can't make a forward paddle and if I haven't taken the time to master it.
Right. Okay.
And so when I think about like that, it seems like a funny concept, and we kind of laugh about it, but when you see new raft guides, you see this a lot too. They haven't mastered how to make paddle strokes in their body dynamics. So you'll see them fall down in the boat, and then they're trying to, they're literally people. I've seen people sitting on the floor trying to guide like this, and there's no strength, there's no power, and there's no control. And that, I think, is a really important concept for reminding folks that, hey, get out there and just do some forward paddles. Get out there and just do some back paddles. And work on your paddle strokes, work on your form, work on your technique, because even in easy whitewater like this, we can sit here and we can practice good forward paddles, strong body position, get where we need to be, really lock that in. And so, like you said, once you get the reps, you get, from paddling stuff like this, you get the time on the water, which helps you with that body positioning.
Right.
Because you need to know how to J-stroke, you need to know how to forward paddle.
Right.
But then running the big rapids gets you saying, oh, okay, I can't fall down on the boat. I have to be up.
Right.
It's a really it's a fine balance. And I think that you're right. It's hard to do that sometimes because there's not a lot of rivers out there that I've run that have that level of intensity with the length of whitewater.
Right. You're looking for it, because a lot of times, it might have that intensity you're looking for, but it's not sustained over several miles. It's a couple miles, maybe a mile, and then you're like, okay, well, those are all the good ones. Yeah. And now we got to paddle the next 6 miles until we can get to the next access, and then we can go back up and do that again.
Exactly.
But there's definitely, that's pretty much one of the lessons that I think every boater needs to learn is just the repetition, the time on the water, doing the runs, doing the skills, and whether you're paddling or rowing, it all takes time on the water. There's not really there's not really a substitution for time on the water, time on the oars, time on the paddles. And you can do a lot of that paddling, you know, on mellower stretches of water and train and then kind of get to where you start just ratcheting it up, and getting, you know, more and more intense.
Yeah. So one of the things we wanted to chat about today too was the program that I'm running with the kids that I have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so this is one thing that I take into training with the kids. Now, I think the most important thing is having fun.
Right. Of course.
And that's a big part of it, because if you're not having fun, you're losing kids. And just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not fun. That's the other thing that I think is really interesting. And so, you know, sometimes I don't often have parents with us on the trips when we're doing training.
Right.
And so my kids' team is high school kids. So they got to be in high school, and it basically ends up being like 13 to 18 years old. It's kind of the age ranges of the kids that I teach. And my goal is to make the best paddlers that I can. I want these kids to go super hard. I want them to be dropping waterfalls. You know, some of the content that we've sent over to you guys is girls like Lexi and Lulu just dropping waterfalls and you know, showboating, for lack of a better term, in a lot of cases. But, you know, they are running hard whitewater at a very high level. And the only way that they do that is through the reps. And so taking it into what can we do to take someone from fear to confidence to joy. You know, I'll start with the young kids, and I always say, like, and my team has been largely girls team, and I always joke with them. I'm like, look, you can cry about rapids, but you can't cry about boys.
Right.
So I say, look, it's okay to have an emotional reaction to rapids, right? Like, you can come up to a rapid and say, I am scared of this rapid. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't think I'm ready for this. All those things are totally valid. Your emotions are valid. But at the end of the day, you still either got to run that rapid or you got to portage it.
Yep.
And you got to learn something from it. And so when we go out, I want the kids charging hard. I want them getting into stuff that feels in over their head. And I want them to have people around them that they can trust and know that, okay, if I flip and swim, I'm getting a throwback right there. Boom. So we train really, really hard. And part of our initial phases of getting kids in the program is to take them and say, okay, we're going to go down an easy class 3 section of river. We're going to put you in some sort of thermal protection, wetsuit, dry suit, helmets, always mandatory, as long as we're on the water, like all that personal protective equipment.
Right.
And mandatory. Like they kids take their helmets off. I'm like, no, put it back on. I don't care. And I think that's important because you have to learn to trust your gear. And so when we're flipping in flat water, paddles are going everywhere.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
the boat might hit you. There's all sorts of things, and especially if you got an oar frame or something like that, stuff's going all over. We got a pump back here. We got a paddle right there. We got, you know, buckles all over the place.
Yep.
I got you right here. Like, you could come and follow me. So if we're gonna run that, you know, class 3 whitewater, trying to get people in, we got to make it fun. We got to figure out ways to make it fun. We can't make it all work, because then we lose kids. But one thing we can do is say, all right, we're going to empower you and set you up for success by teaching you how to throw bags. We're going to teach you safety skills. We're going to talk about hydrology. And what's crazy about kids is when you take whitewater and you try to explain it to a 14-year-old, like, that's one of the hardest things in the world. And especially if you're like myself, who's a total physics nerd, and I'm trying to explain this to some kids. Like, a lot of times you get the nerdy kids, and they'll pick it up. But if you can boil it down to those 8 things, this is what it is, then all of a sudden they say, oh, okay, I can understand this. And I've had times where we go up to a rapid, and they're like, oh, people are like, oh, that hole looks nasty. You got like 10th year boaters, 5th to 10th year boaters saying, oh, that's a nasty hole over there. We don't want to run that. And the kids are like, that's a type B hydraulic jump. Nothing's going to happen to us. We might flip, but go set up a throwback down there. We'll be fine. And then they like hop in the boat and run it. And everybody's standing there looking at me like, who are these children? Like, what? And so I think, like, kids are sponges, and they follow what we do.
Right? Oh, yeah.
Like, when you start doing something, if you're always wearing your helmet, they're always wearing their helmet. because they're looking to you for approval as well.
Right.
They don't want to get punished or something, but they also are saying, like, how is it that we do business on the river? How do we boat? And I get this.
Let's go forward.
I get this from the kids a lot, where they say, you know, something happens and they're like, this is not how we boat. This is not what we do. And I'm like, okay. And they start to fall into those patterns of like, this is the way to do it. And that's good from a safety perspective if you're trying to lay the groundwork of solid safety for taking kids on the river. Because let's be honest, like, this is a dangerous place. This is not like designed for human survival all the time. I mean, we can't even breathe the liquid we're floating on. So it can be dangerous. And I want the kids to, I would rather them be overly safe and wear their PPE, walking around on the river, have their throw bags with them when they're scouting rapids, than I would anything else. And sometimes, like, people go out on the river and we want to escape the bounds of society. We want to escape like normal society. And then, you know, I can see how it causes some conflict sometimes when we've got these kids who are like, this is the way we do it. But again, I'd rather them being safe than not safe. It's kind of like, you know, if you're getting kids into riding motorcycles and you're not wearing their helmet, they're going to be like, oh, he doesn't wear his helmet. Like, why should I wear my helmet? It's like, dude, you're on a motorcycle. Like, come on. So with kids teams, you have to make it fun. You have to, and you end up being like this raft dad or this raft mom to them.
Right.
You have to take snacks all the time. You have to think of everything because they're probably not going to think of it, and you can't blame them because they're kids. Like,
Right. Oh yeah.
so you have to breathe. You have to think about everything and set everything up for success. And make sure that they're set up for success, because once they're set up for success, then they're allowed to fail. And this is the other hardest thing I think that people have, because a lot of times we come out and people take their kids rafting and they don't want to see their kids fail.
Right.
And I always tell people, like, look, when I take your kids rafting, it's not my job to protect your children from the horrors of the universe. It's my job to put it into context for them. Your job is to protect them from that.
Right.
And so the thing about any human is that we need adversity and we need to fail to learn. And so this is something that we don't get in a lot of modern society. That we come out here, we're in this really adverse environment. And we come out here and we fail, and it's like, I've seen kids break down crying because they can't make an end. And they're just not making the paddle strokes,
Right.
and they're like, ah. I'm like, look, what are you feeling? And they're like, I just can't make this eddy. I'm like, okay, feel it out. You gotta cry it out. Like, sit there and cry it out. It's fine. They get that emotion out of their system, and then they go, okay, what am I doing wrong? Because they realize they're not making, and we have to let them make their mistakes.
Right.
But we also have to set them up for success. So this is why I always start with, like, let's go out on some easier whitewater. We're gonna swim some big watery rapids, stuff with not a lot of rocks in it, so they're not getting beat up. You know, we're gonna swim these like deep class 2 rapids. We're going to flip a boat and flat water. We're gonna hit a rock and swim in a deep channel. And then we're gonna go out and we're gonna stand on the side of the river, and you're gonna toss a throw back to some other kids in the water. And you guys, what that does is it learns that they learn to work together as a team, but they also learn the rescue skills as well. So I'm trying to teach them the boating skills, the rescue skills, and I want to teach them a practical way of what happens when you hit a rock or slam into an eddy, or you know, you go a way you don't want to go.
Right.
And so we have to start at a very low level. And I think teaching teenagers is not that much different from teaching adults, is that we have to start at a low level and build up at the speed that the person is trying to learn it. And there's stages. We got to have certain stages of how we're going to learn to do this. I mean, one of my friends, John Kozakowski, who owns a company in California, he always says, look, if you run a class 3 rapid 10 times in a row, then a class 2 rapid doesn't feel so big. You run a class 4 rapid 10 times in a row, class 3 rapid doesn't feel so big. But you have to get those reps in. Like,
Right.
and I think that's the same thing for kids as well. You got to teach kids to get out there and make that happen that way and build it up in stages. You can't just hit them with a fire hose and expect them to be amazing boaters.
And I noticed that you have, a lot of the team kids, they come to you at, say, at 14, and they paddle with you for a few years. And then when they get out of high school, do you keep contact with those kids? Like, what is their journey after that? If because you teach them a lot of skills, they're running consistent class 5+ water and get to a comfort level with it, right? Then they head off to either go to college or whatever is their next phase. What do you have any like stories of kids that have just kind of moved on and one, do they keep sharing that knowledge, right? Because that's the piece of if you're gonna bring more people into the sport and you train somebody up and they have a really wonderful experience of learning all these skills, does that person then in turn pass it on?
So that's happening quite a bit. I find that once they're growing up, they're moving on, they keep going. A lot of the kids keep going after this.
Right.
And so this is the thing about rafting, that's different than kayaking. This is a communal sport. You can't do this without the two of us, really.
Right.
We don't want to go out there and just paddle by ourselves. I mean, in rare cases, we'll go out in R1, but usually, even if I'm R1ing, I want other boats with me. I want to be out with my friends. This is a social sport. This is a team sport. I like to call it a disorganized team sport. And so I think the very nature of rafting itself precludes the possibility for not sharing knowledge. You have to have other people in the sport, and if you're going to go off to college in another state or go somewhere else, you're going to find that other people want to raft. And you have the skills to do it.
Outdoor rec centers and that kind of thing that definitely, you can find that community for sure. And a lot of those, I would imagine some of those kids that are in your program, they research schools that they're wanting to go to, and they're like, yes, I wanted to have these certain things, but it'd be nice if it has a few rivers around as well.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So I think that when we're trying to get new people into the sport, we talked a lot about how we do that and bringing people in, but you lay the groundwork, especially with kids. You can lay the groundwork, and then you want to keep encouraging them to keep boating. You want them, I want to see all the kids that I've trained to go out there and keep boating. And one cool thing that happens is, even though they might be young people, their skills start rubbing off on other people. You start seeing people go boating in a different way, or you start seeing knives change locations.
Right.
You start seeing flip lines be stored differently. You start seeing different kinds of flip lines. You start seeing some of the kids are like, hey, let's go out and do some flip drills because I used to do that back on the team, kind of thing. And it's they want to flip. They want to go try their skills. They want to push their limits. And though they might not be under my umbrella still, and I might not be there, those skills are still in their minds. And so it gives them a really strong basis for saying, hey, I want to keep doing this. And then one of the other things with our program that I always try to do is I will delegate down to the senior team members and then have them work with the junior team members. So when we have 18-year-old, it's a great example. My friend's daughter wanted to go rafting. And so a couple of the gals from the team said, yeah, we'll come out and we'll boat with her. So we went out on our Ford and I said, okay, girls, teach her how to inflate that boat. And so they go over and start working with the new girl because, naturally they don't want to inflate the boat because inflating the boat.
Right.
It's work. It's work. So all the work things, they start teaching her how to, our rigging plans. They teach her how to inflate a boat properly. Right. They teach her how to sit in a boat. And I'm like, hey, I need you to work with her on that. And so I start working with more of the senior kids on how to coach the new kids that are coming in. And I say, look, we've learned all these things from me. Now you need to pass it on.
Right.
And if I create 10 boaters, we create 10 more boaters, then that just has an exponential explosion. And I think anybody, to bring another boater in, take somebody on your wing, and keep moving on like that, and teach somebody to teach somebody else. That's the philosophy.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, it's a lot, like from what a lot of what I have found as a common thread is people, one, they need the hook, right? They need to get the hook to be interested, whether that's with a commercial company or with a youth group or with a friend who's going on the river. And then they do that initially, and it's like they're like, wow, I really like this. Like I want to learn more of this. And when they are really young, if they they need support from their parents to kind of be like, okay, if this is something you want to do, then let's pursue it. Let's figure out like what's the gear you need, what are the ways that you can continue on to that. Like it's almost very similar to like teenagers that are getting into whitewater is similar to like kind of the element that rock gyms are doing, where like rock climbing gyms kind of work on bringing the youth in there and getting them into programs. And like you use the analogy of skiing, and skiing does that very well, and they do it at a high volume. And so it's really like what kind of things can we take from the ski industry and from the rock climbing model and get it more into rafting? Because like that's the piece is like the program you're doing is you're talking about, if you teach 10 kids and then they in turn teach 10 more people. But like we don't have, like we talked with the Oregon State Marine Board about like there's not a statewide life jacket fitting week.
Yep.
Like you want to have a life jacket that fits well and you'll wear it.
Yeah.
And so, but also like possibly just like can whitewater rafting go to that space where it's just a day of a lot of different entities getting together to introduce people to paddling.
Super important.
And almost like doing a meetup where it's just like, it's very low pressure. They don't have to have a big commitment, but they come, they actually get the life jacket, the helmet, the gear, and figure out like, oh, I'm going to go, you don't have to run anything really big, class 2 stretch for a couple miles,
around,
just get them out on it and see if they have that interest and get that, that hook.
Yeah.
Then once they get the hook, then they will pursue all the avenues to get more and more involved.
And much like skiing, you're going to lose a large percentage of those people, but you're going to keep a good percentage.
Right.
And one of the drawbacks of my program is I'm not running numbers, and that's the reality of the situation. I'm not running the big numbers that needs to happen. I might be operating a high level, but we're not running a lot of kids through the program. There are programs out there that do that. There's one in Moab, Utah called Canyonlands Field Institute. They got a great youth guide program. There's another one. There's a summer camp in Coloma, California. That's called Junior Guides. They run a lot of people through that. Those programs are running the numbers to get the kids in there. There's Christian Adventure Camp in California as well. It does that. They're running a lot of numbers in there and getting people through there. So that's really helpful because a certain number of those people are going to be lifers.
Right. They're going to get that hook and they're going to be more into it. Absolutely. Well, Trevor, I think we're kind of running out of some of our daylight here. So tell the folks just kind of if they are in the Coloma area, is that where you are?
Yep.
If they are in that area and they have teenage kids that are interested, tell the folks just how they can get a hold of you, and maybe if they're watching this, you can at least help them find either your program or a program that will help them start to pursue that journey.
For sure, yeah. So you can always check us out at raftingmag.com. We've got all our articles up there. We have a subscription service that you can work through different hard river skills and pieces of content. I'll show you how to do that. Also, social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, all your favorites, YouTube, and you can contact us that way. If you are coming through Northern California and want to come boat with me, I'm always out there. Drop me a message, and we're going to start doing a lot more training programs here in the next couple of years, working through that. I just want to build up more resources for training. So if you're looking for training, drop me a line. I'm happy to get out there on the water with you and teach you what things I know and try and help you with the skills that you want to learn. So it's
Excellent. Excellent. We will put all of those links in the bio of this episode. And if you enjoyed this episode and you do get out on the river, share the river, be patient, be calm. If somebody's right there to put in and they maybe have some questions, help them out, pass it on. And if you enjoy these podcasts, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your river community. Let's help grow the community. And if you want to find out anything else about paddles and oars, you can check us out at paddlesandoars.com. And until next time, this is Zach, Trevor. We will see you on the river. All right, let's go ahead and just forward paddle, get out into the current so we can move along. Yep. So basically this one is just as we navigate down through here, just basically just some riffles and rocks. As I will fire off questions to you and answer them with the first thing that comes to mind or say pass.
There.
Okay? All right, so Trevor has agreed to do rapid questions in the rapid. And we are just dropping in right now. And Trevor, what is the first body of water that you ever worked on?
South Fork American River in Coloma, California.
Excellent. What is your favorite craft of choice when on the water?
I would say 10-foot raft.
10-foot raft. Excellent.
R1.
Have you ever been on the Grand Canyon, Colorado stretch?
No, never been on the Grand Canyon.
All right. What is the most intense river that you have ever boated on? Either with a team or someone in charge.
Okay, most intense river I've ever boated on is probably tributary to the South Fork of the American, either Silver Creek at really high water, and I swam and I almost drowned twice in the same mile of water. That was one of my most intense days. One of the other ones would be the Upper Middle Cosumnes in California. And that one was just like huge waterfalls. I never thought I'd be there. And I fired it up. It was awesome.
And have you ever done multi-day trips?
I've done a few multi-days. I don't enjoy multi-days as much as I like single-day kids fly water.
Gotcha. And on a multi-day, what is the favorite campground of yours?
I think that is Clavey Falls on Tuolumne River in California.
Nice. And if you were to describe the river that you mentioned earlier, Silver Creek, in one word, what would that be?
Rapids.
Rapids. All right, and that is Rapids questions in the rapid. I would say just about dark, but not quite yet, and we're a wrap.